Today's reading from Living Wisely, Living Well by Swami Kriyananda, October 23rd. If you want to succeed in life, concentrate your powers. No one, if he wishes to penetrate a field of ice, presses down on the whole field. He drills with a sharp instrument at one point. Similarly, the densest obstacle can be penetrated by calm, focused intention. By seeking God through the little opening of your own ego, you will soon find yourself swimming in the sea of cosmic bliss. This is such an important teaching on the spiritual path, the need to concentrate everything. Concentrate, I believe the origin of the word in English is something to do with to gather, to bring together. And it's just as Swamiji says, that when we bring our forces together, when we focus, when we take, instead of movements in all different directions, or even with seeming concentration, but spread out and diffuse, then when instead we, as I said, focus them, our powers of accomplishment become greatly increased. Really, this is one of the things that's interesting that you see among geniuses, that they have the ability to concentrate. I can't say I've done a comprehensive study of all of them. Some, I think, are probably just using gifts developed from a past life when they concentrated, and so maybe they don't need to concentrate now. But certainly the brilliant people that I've met have been able to focus their minds. What was interesting to me growing up, because I was studying in the fields of mathematics and computer science, is that I met very brilliant people, but I noticed that though they were all brilliant, the ones meaning the professors at the universities or some of the students that were there, in the years ahead of me, though they were brilliant, they weren't uniformly happy. And that surprised me, because though I was seeking professional success in the same field as they, and I looked up to them all for that success, I was a little disturbed by the fact that they weren't happy, because in fact that's what I was looking for through that success. That if indeed I could publish this many research papers, or I could become a professor too and get the tweed jacket or whatever it was that made you a professor, that then I would be happy. And so it was again disconcerting to my dream of happiness through mathematics and so on, and academic work, that to see that they had all that, and some of these people, some of them were happy, certainly, but some of them weren't. And so I realized that though I had been concentrating in one particular way of mathematics and computer science, that may not be actually the shortest path or the straightest path to the goal that I was seeking, which was happiness. And what was funny for me was that many people who knew me when I was younger said, "What are you doing pursuing this field? It's so dry." Someone said to me, "Do you feel that you like working with computers because you have a hard time relating to people?" And I said, "No." I could have said, "No, do you?" Just because it wasn't a very polite thing for him to say. And he actually specialized in various creative impolitenesses, a relative of mine. But so these other people who knew me said, "You should deal more with people. You'll be better off working with people," and so on. And I said, no, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. But in fact, I discovered that I wasn't, and they were right. But it wasn't just working with people that satisfied me, because ultimately I found I was seeking happiness, yes, but through truth. I needed to know what was true. Why did I need to know? I don't know. But I did need to know what was true. I cared whether a certain behavior of mine was correct or not correct, whether it was leading me in the direction that I wanted to go, and I had a sense of direction. I changed that direction because I no longer saw it in this way, and I turned it to another way. But Master said that of, for example, his disciples who were businessmen. He said they can grow very rapidly on the spiritual path, and in fact his two most advanced disciples were businessmen, highly successful businessmen. But he said, in business you train your mind to concentrate in one way. And though it may be, for example, a very materialistic direction, suppose you are laying pipeline, somewhere and thinking about how many cubits and what is the diameter and what kind of materials and all the things that, if it bores you, it's only because it's boring me in the telling of it. And I'm transmitting that boredom. It doesn't interest me at all. And yet, that ability to concentrate, to focus, then when you apply it in the direction of God, you can go very quickly. And so similarly, you may find that when you meet an excellent tradesman or an excellent craftsman or somebody who has a great skill in something very different from your own interest, an excellent artist or musician, again, somebody who, let's say for the sake of example, is in a very different field from you, a different interest, and yet when you hear them talk about their field, or you see their expertise in it, it's thrilling. It's very satisfying. And I find that again and again, not even in an effort to try to relate to somebody, just seeing it in itself, even if they're not trying to relate back. They're not trying to tell me how wonderful their thing is. It's just by seeing their focus and passion for it. It can be very inspiring to see, because in that way we can connect. So why is it hard to gather our forces? Well, leaving aside the fact that our mind is the most restless and hardest thing to gather in this world, sure, that's true, and it's helpful for us to meditate and so on and have these practices of yoga. But especially speaking to you all, that's probably obvious, and that's what we're all focusing on. So what are other things that we can do? One thing to look for is just to find ways to make the spiritual path fun. Find ways to have fun on the spiritual path. Find ways to have fun in your life. If you're not having enough fun in life, then something's wrong. If you're not smiling enough, something's wrong. If you're not laughing, I always know that if I laugh and go, ha ha ha, and feel, gosh, my stomach is sore because the muscles have not been used in that way in some time, that there's been a problem. And so it's necessary to have an emergency laughter session or something to just lighten up. And so when we have fun, as Master said, life becomes a nest of fun with God. And so if we can find ways to have fun, we will automatically engage our interest and focus our powers in that fun thing. It's amazing to see how children playing with a little toy can just be immersed in some imaginary world of flying spaceships or traveling ferries or whatever, and for hours, without TV even, they can be just caught up in their imagination or in this, again, focused on how this wheel keeps turning on the truck. Wow. And so as a school teacher, I noticed this and was very impressed by that. So again, they were interested. This is another easy way to gather your forces. Have interest. Master said when you're interested in something, it's hard not to think about it. So when meditating, if you can just direct your interest to God, it will be easy to meditate. If that's too hard for you or too abstract, then direct your interest towards the Guru. He is much more familiar in a way. He's really God's messenger to you. He also said that, Master said, see people in movie theaters. Don't they become yogis? He said sitting still, motionless for hours, at least until it's time for intermission and more popcorn. if it's a good movie, you don't even notice the time passing, and yet you've done all the right things for meditation, except meditate, but in terms of sitting with proper stillness and having the mind in one direction when our interest is awakened. And so again, find ways, not only during your meditation, but in whatever you're doing, to try to keep yourself interested. So, for example, if I knew of a friend at Ananda who had lost his job or was out of work at Ananda, or maybe he worked outside Ananda. But anyway, the only job he could find was photocopying. There was a particular need at that time for a lot of photocopying. This was earlier in the days when we didn't do as much email and digital things, and so a lot of copies and triplicate or whatever, and big, big documents. And so, I mean, I don't know if you've ever done photocopying. I have done quite a bit of it. And usually I would try to distract myself with some other thoughts or listen to music or something. And then that can be dangerous because you can forget to flip the page at the wrong time and then suddenly, anyway, it's a nightmare. So he started trying to find the most efficient way that he could photocopy. He would do timed trials with himself to see if he could beat his previous record. And in all these ways, he tried to photocopy as creatively as possible. And it was wonderful. So if you can, in some repetitive task or whatever it is, focus so much on it that you become engaged and interested, that's wonderful. In other words, be in the habit of paying attention. Be in the habit of concentrating on what you are doing. But if you can't, because it's too tedious, or it's just, again, like, for example, washing the dishes, and you can do it more or less out of habit, then while doing it, then try to, again, listen to a talk of Swamiji or of Master, or listen to music that's uplifting. In other words, use that time when your mind would more or less be disengaged or zoning out, and zone it in to something positive. In fact, it's a great way to study if you have any occasion to, where you need to study or go deeper in these teachings, for example. It's a wonderful way to do that because you'll get two benefits. You'll have listened to this wonderful talk and you'll know a lot more than you did when it started out. And you'll also look around and all the dishes are clean and all the chores are done somehow, magically at the same time. So we don't want to develop or feed the habit of boredom, of checking out, of not paying attention, of resisting, because even if we're doing it in an innocent way where it doesn't, I'll do this, but I don't have to like it, that habit, unfortunately, carries over to other parts of our life. And so we want to be in the habit of using our mind, using our power of concentration. Again, the way to do it, to be interested, to enjoy, to have fun. Another is to develop devotion, which is just a higher expression of interest and of fun. Because when we love, for example, someone, our mind automatically goes to them. When we love, for example, our guru, just the thought of him makes us lighten up a little bit. And so develop that devotion. You can do so by chanting. You can do so by having pictures of the Master around your house. You can do so also by, again, getting to know your guru better by watching videos or reading his books and so on, by tuning into him in meditation or her. But also, pray for devotion. Say, help me to love you more. Help me to understand more. On a very sort of jnanic level, on the level of just impersonal wisdom, I'm always reminded of Sri Yukteswar telling Master, the only reason why people will love you is if you are useful to them. And so if we love anyone, we should question, but do I love them only because they are useful to me? And you could say, well, no, of course not if it's my child or my parents or my spouse or so on, but you'd be surprised. If you have two parents, then you could say, well, this one is a little more useful to me or useful in a more pleasant way, and I can't help but favoring this one, even though I'm not supposed to. Children, well, anyway, I won't expand that further, but anyway, you know your own heart. And spouses, luckily, no, it's not that way. But still, it is just as the person is useful to me. And it may seem crass, but you'd be surprised also in seeing the reasons why people may be fond of you. Again, it doesn't have to be a crass thing, but there is always an element of that there is some use. If only through you I feel I am expanding my own identity, and still that is useful. So, for example then, try to be useful to the Guru. You'll be able to feel his love more. He loves you unconditionally. His love is not human love. And divine love does not depend on usefulness. So don't think that God will love you more if you're useful or love you less if you're useless. It's not that way. He loves you just as much. But try also to think of the ways. For suppose you can't feel any interest, any fun. No, not interested in anything, and nothing is fun. Not feeling any love, not feeling any joy. Then it can be very helpful to try to feel gratitude. Gratitude is the sort of easiest way to jumpstart the feelings of the heart. Think of 5 things, for example, that you're grateful for today, that happened today. This, specifically, not just I'm grateful for my family, and I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head, and there's enough food, and that there's electricity most of the time, and, not that you're just reeling off a list of things that you always say, but something specifically that happened that day. You could be grateful for a test that you went through and came out the other side. You could, if nothing else, it just keeps life from being too repetitive and boring. Think about how it woke me up today out of my sort of morning routine that I'm sleepwalking through. I remember once going to the bathroom in the evening to brush my teeth before going to bed, and there was a scorpion right on the sink. And it certainly got my attention. I'm glad I saw it first before it saw me. But anyway, I haven't forgotten it, and that was quite an experience. I brought some friends over. This was in Italy, and they said "Scorpa," and I figured I knew what that meant. It was just an emergency. So anyway, gratitude can help you to feel if you don't feel anything. And remember, if we don't feel anything, it is not the absence of feeling, it is trapped feeling. This is something Swamiji has pointed out. So if we're not feeling, it's because there's a block. It's because there's something we are preventing ourselves from feeling. Or, that's usually what it is. Either I know there's a hurt in here, and so I don't want to let it out, so I feel nothing. Nothing can hurt me. I'm fine, I'm strong. We can't live very long comfortably like that, though, because we're also choking off our power, our energy, and so on. It needs to flow through the spine and not be locked in the heart chakra. Or we're trying to block out something outwardly, that I'm so stressed and I'm so worried about this situation that I've kind of closed myself off to it, but therefore I can't relate meaningfully to anything else in my purview. And so I can't even think of a happy time. All I can think of is what I'm not thinking about, using my concentration to just pretend it doesn't exist. And so again, in that situation, maybe we need to do that to get through a crunch time, but it shouldn't always be crunch time. And so let us take time then when you can let down your hair. And you can cry about the situation if you need to, or talk to a friend, or chant, or write furiously to God in your journal and say, hey, what's the big idea? But there is a time when we have to be very open and allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling, and that it's okay. If we're feeling very angry and upset, for example, it can be helpful to express those feelings in solitude, rather than blasting some poor innocent bystander with them. Speaking of that, it's interesting. Swamiji said, when you get upset and you speak out of undue emotion, over emotion, especially upset emotion, we tend to say more than we actually mean. In other words, we tend to be than we actually feel. We'd be a little more cutting than we would be, just to push the person, leave me alone, I have a headache, get away from me. And we say more, we exaggerate. And when we say more than what we actually feel, that statement is just what the other person remembers and hangs on to. I can't believe you said that I always, after all, and that's the one thing we didn't even really mean. And so that's why we have to always be careful when too upset. Better to just and run over and just scream into a pillow or something, but try to at least detonate the atomic bomb in the desert rather than in the middle of a picnic. Beyond that, then, I would say, in terms of gathering our forces, just to touch on one other topic or idea very lightly, is the concept of it's actually one of the niyamas of Patanjali, of austerity. Tapasya is the Sanskrit word. Austerity is the English translation. And Swamiji gives it a beautiful definition: living an uncluttered life. And every time I read that word in the Raja Yoga book, every time I hear that word uncluttered, I just, what a relief it is and would be and will be to have less clutter in our lives, fewer SMSs coming onto the phone about, rummy gold and all these fascinating things you can learn about. Fewer things about a new internet service provider that can offer you a good deal, that level of clutter, advertisements and so on, sure. But even in our homes, it's amazing how an uncluttered room, how a tidy room can help you not only to think better, not only to relax, but also it gives you energy. When you come home to clutter, it to some extent drains your energy, if only with the thought, yeah, I really should do something about that. Or the maid didn't come today again, when there is no maid. And so, one very helpful thing is this: if you have the habit of not cleaning your house, which is to say not really fussing around with things and putting them in the right place, then if you can just force yourself to do it once, then it will probably stay that way, because you tend not to mess up things in your house. It will more or less, be the way you left it. It was messy after the last party and you never touched it, so now clean it up, and then again, by your habits, you won't be touching it, and so it'll stay that way, because maybe you're too mental of a person and are always just on the computer. And so it can be beneficial that way. So one thing you could do in order to clean the house is just turn the internet off. Not right now, but soon. Turn the power off. And then you just I have nothing else to do, might as well clean. And so anyway, it can be very fun that way to do different things with your environment. But of course, uncluttered life goes well beyond just physical environment. Looking also at how you spend your time. Not with a critical eye, not with harsh judgment. Sometimes we do need to. As a friend of mine said to me recently, I know you're busy and I know you have to allocate time for other tasks as well as the occasional staring blankly at the wall time. And I appreciated that, because it's true that we just kind of just need a little bit of a break. It really is a dip into the subconscious mind. It's not ideal, but if that's the only option before us that we can manage, then go for that, for the sake of preserving your nerves, because your nerves are very important. When your nerves, as Haridas Ji from Bangalore, Ananda Bangalore, has often said, when the nerves are shot, they become first priority compared to everything else, because without your nerves, you've got nothing. And with shot nerves, things can get pretty dangerous pretty quickly. So better to have a timeout and regrow not those nerves. Sometimes Dharmini and I will joke that we need to regrow the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is the coating on the nerves that insulates them and protects them from one another so they don't sort of short-circuit one another. And when our nerves are too shot, it's just let that regrowth of this thing happen so that we can be calm again. Of course, meditation is the best way, but I wanted to give you other options as well. So in any case, most of all, the more we love God, the more it's easy to do all of these things. So God bless you, and thank you for joining us tonight.